it's my privilege to introduce our next plenary speaker, and her name is Adriana Caldera, Boroffice, and she is the CEO of the YWCA of Golden Gate, Silicon Valley. I don't know, they're taking over the whole Bay Area here, but pretty large organization and recently expanded. And Adriana is a nonprofit leader. She has a wealth of knowledge and expertise in the movement, having worked in the movement to eliminate violence, gender-based trafficking, working on issues around homelessness, etc., for many years. Adriana stands for peace, courage, and wellness as a means of being whole for herself and others. She's also the mother of a 4-year-old son named Benjamin. And I recently, within the last number of months, spoke with Adriana just by means of reaching out to many of the programs around the state. And when I was calling her to just see what they needed and offer her TA, but then we had to bring her here because when I started really hearing and understanding all of the work that's happening there at the YWCA under Adriana's leadership, I was like, you're living what we are trying to help bring to this movement. You're doing what we're trying to help in terms of really looking at issues of oppression and racism and integrating those into the work to prevent sexual, domestic violence, human trafficking, all of that. And so they really take on an intersectional and interconnected approach. It's not we're working to end this and working to then that, and there's been just a lot of work done at the organization, and every time we see that, I think it warms our hearts. It certainly does mine. So while I was calling to see like what can we help you with, then we ended up saying, can you help us? So thank you so much. I'd like to invite Adriana up to share a few words with you.
Good morning, everyone. God, there's so many of you from up here. As it says, my name is Adriana Caldera Boroffice, and I stand for peace, courage, and healing as a means of being whole for myself and all others. And I lead with my values in spaces because I want you to know a bit more about what I hold dear, how I show up in the work every day, and hopefully that builds a connection between you and I. I started work in the gender-based violence field as a volunteer in 2003 on my college campus, and today I find myself serving as a leader of an organization. I am the first Latina to hold this space in my organization's 143-year history. And that is a responsibility that I hold very, very dear and take very seriously. And I'm going to do some storytelling with you all today. This is not a how-to, this is not a TED Talk, but my hope is that you'll be able to draw some parallels to work that is happening in your own organizations and communities, learn from the experiences that I will be sharing, and hopefully find some inspiration to center race equity into the work of eradicating sexual violence. And I've had the opportunity to work for the YWCA for the past 12 years with an amazing team of human beings who are compassionate, dedicated, and tireless in supporting survivors on their journeys of healing. And my organization has deep roots in the sexual assault crisis intervention space. We were one of the first rape crisis centers that was established in the state of California. And for context, our organization is a multi-service organization. We have 130 employees on our staff team. We cover 4 counties. And we do multi-services. So not only are we working with survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, and human trafficking, but we're also providing families and individuals in our communities with access to childcare, with housing, as well as with mental health services, education, and employability. And 89% of our staff identify as people of color, and 94% of our staff identify as female. And one of the first major milestones that I experienced along this journey was understanding the role that racism plays in the empowerment of women. One of the things that makes a YWCA is our mission. There are just over 200 local associations across the country, and we all have the same mission, but all of our services are different because we tailor those specifically to the communities in which we find ourselves. Our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And our tagline is to eliminate racism, empower women. So our association had a reverse tagline. We proudly and boldly stated that we empower women, and we talked about the fact that we had a rape crisis center, and we were doing work in the DV space, and we were helping people with childcare. But the elimination of racism portion was something that we never really spoke out loud. Our YWCA actually had these reversed. We had empowerment of women first and elimination of racism second. We didn't have any outward-facing programs or services that focused on the elimination of racism. And we saw the empowerment of women and the elimination of racism as two completely different things, and we treated them as such. And when we were working with survivors, we didn't always see them or honor them in understanding or considering the diverse complexities that they were simultaneously experiencing. And we saw survivors based on their trauma, and it became who they were. For example, if someone came through our doors and they were there to seek emergency shelter, they were a DV survivor. If they were someone who was getting help with a medical forensic exam, they were labeled as a sexual assault survivor. And the systems that we had created with the best intentions to help support survivors were actually labeling them, and we weren't creating internal pathways within our organization to get individuals connected to multiple wraparound services. And a turning point came from our organization in 2014. We underwent a strategic planning process, which I'm sure many of you have gone through in this room before. And our organization committed to examining the elimination of racism portion of our mission. We had difficult conversations about what it meant to eliminate racism, and we had to take a good, hard look at the fact that we had no external-facing program that addressed racism in our communities. We had to admit to ourselves that we were not recognizing when and how survivors were being impacted by racism, whether it was in institutions that they were turning to for support or even from their own communities. Our organization recommitted to being a YWCA, and we reinstated our mission back to placing the elimination of racism at the forefront of our tagline and our mission. And this action, this was a moment where this point in time where we truly began to explore what it would mean to recognize the interconnected nature of racism, classism, sexism within the work of our organization, and specifically within the work of supporting survivors. And once our organization recognized the interconnected nature of our mission's mandate, this led our organization and our staff teams to look at how we could better serve survivors in our community. It allowed us to look at survivors as whole people who might simultaneously be experiencing racism, homelessness, sexual assault, employability, all at the same time. And it allowed us to dream and revision about how we welcome people into our physical buildings, how we screen people for services, and where we provided our services within our communities. It also gave us the opportunity to look at what institutions that we intentionally partnered with, and looking at who we still needed to partner with in our communities. And it also gave us the opportunity to have conversations about how we would show up in those spaces in our communities. Providing direct services based on trauma was no longer enough. And this was a moment of recognizing that change comes with changing systems and culture. And we were not going to create the systemic change that we had dreamed of through direct service provision alone. The time between 2017 and 2021 just feels like an absolute blur to me. I'm sure it does to a lot of you. During this time, personally, I was growing in the work of supporting survivors. I was growing as a leader within my own organization and in my community. And I was really kind of struggling with some questions that kept surfacing for me in the day-to-day of doing my work. I had questions such as, why did our board of directors not reflect the community in which we were serving? Why were the majority of the people in our organization who are people of color, and the bulk of the people who we're working with in the community are in communities of color, and yet people in leadership within my organization are predominantly white? And why was I not seeing more people of color in leader positions within my own organization and within other organizations within our larger community? And most importantly, why did we not have a plan to answer how we were going to shift any of that? And as my organization started to have conversations and we were attempting to better understand and embrace the connections of our dual mission of eliminating racism and empowering women, it became clear that we also needed to have more intentional conversations and space for action around how we could center race equity in our work in a more thoughtful and intentional way. And I remember being hungry for something, a training, a toolkit, some kind of roadmap that we could have to start having conversations about this within our organizations. And in 2017, I, along with 3 staff members, attended a training by Equity in the Center. And this was a training that was focused on their publication, Awake to Woke to Work, Building a Race Equity Culture. And this was really a light bulb for myself personally. This was a tool that I thought, oh my God, this can help us to have conversations in our organization and provide a roadmap to how we can just start to build a culture that's more focused on race equity and that really centers that in the fabric of our organization. And after this training, like a lot of trainings and conferences, I'm sure you've all experienced, you're on that high of like, oh, we're gonna change the world and we're gonna do all these great things. And we get back to the office and the day-to-day realities hit. And the same was true for me and my colleagues in this space. We were trying to think about how we would do this work, how would we get our CEO on board, you know, what kind of committees do we need, when are we gonna meet, and the day-to-day of crisis response, advocacy needs, grant reporting, all that kind of stuff, it just got in the way. And our best intentions kind of fell to the side, and this idea, this roadmap was put on a shelf for another day and time when we had more space and ability. But we never seemed to have that space in the work. And 2017 to present has just been incredibly challenging for everyone. Communities being threatened, a national leader actively using racist language, a sexual assaulter in chief, if you will. Our county, in Santa Clara County, where we do much of our work, we experienced 2 mass shootings in that time period. The Gilroy Garlic Festival shooting and a shooting at the VTA, which is our local transportation agency. We saw 13 people killed in those instances and over 15 people wounded. And our organization, as well as many of the sister organizations in the community, were directly impacted. We saw a groundswell of activism and protest in reaction to multiple Black and brown individuals being killed at the hands of law enforcement. And we also experienced a global pandemic to top it all off, and a shelter-in-place order, which really forced us to rethink about how we deliver services in our communities, how we provide critical services to survivors in our communities. And it was a time for reflection and recognizing the inequities that were present in the systems that we were all a part of. All of these things served as a catalyst for our growing leadership team within our organization to act and create change. And our leadership was growing more and more people of color were moving into roles of leadership that had traditionally been held by white counterparts. There was a profound desire to shift organizational culture. And we recognized that this would involve internal as well as external systems change. We recognized that if we were going to do this work externally, we needed to do this work internally as well. So we took a leap collectively, and we put our intentions into practice. And in 2020, our leadership team created a 3-year race equity plan. It's not a perfect plan. We didn't wait for a grant to magically fall from the sky and help us to do this work. There are things that I wish that we would have done differently with the rollout and the creation of the plan, but it's okay, because we're trying. And we are creating space and prioritizing this work. And this plan is guiding our organization on a process of adopting a race equity culture that is more focused on proactive counteraction of social inequities. This is a plan that is helping our organization to come to a space where we can clearly define, implement, and advance race equity internally while simultaneously advocating for it externally in our communities. So we've completed the first 2 years of work in this space, and we're embarking on our 3rd year now. And we are continuing to learn and grow in this work. We are developing our muscles and talking about race and racism and its implications for our organization and our community. And we're embracing continuous improvement in race equity that is prioritized through continuous feedback loops with our staff and community. And I share all of this as storytelling, as a way to hopefully connect with work that you all are doing within your organizations and within your communities. And I wanted to share some reflections and learnings in this space. One, I recognize that our organization and our mission, there's privilege there. We are a large organization that has resources and over 130 staff to be able to dedicate towards this work. And our mission specifically calls us to look at the link between racism and empowering women. And how can we empower women if we're not simultaneously addressing the racism that women face? The world is not going to stop and magically give you the space to do this work. You have to prioritize it and intentionally plan for it. And for us, this looks like building goals and objectives into plans, creating an appropriate timeline and estimation for the amount of time and effort that this work is going to do, and really giving staff the opportunity to attend and to participate actively in this and recognize them for their time and efforts in this space. I also recognize that we don't have to have a perfect product or plan to start doing the work. Our plan is far from perfect, but we are growing and learning with it, and we're treating it as a living document, a way for us to continuously have conversations and come back, make changes, and push ourselves to do more and grow. And also, we recognize that people come into this space of talking about race equity and racism and sexism, all the interconnected pieces, at different levels of understanding. And we really needed to take time to help invest and make sure that people had the appropriate language and had a basis of understanding for these issues so that we can start having conversations in community with one another. And finally, I learned that the work doesn't stop. This is going to be something that we are going to continue to do for years to come. And I hope that our organization will continue to always innovate in this space. And I wanted to leave you all with some of my hopes for the future in doing this work, and hopefully you all will consider picking up this piece and doing this within your own communities or within your own organizations. I hope that we will continue to view survivors that we serve and their families as whole and complete human beings, oftentimes who are experiencing multiple facets at the same time, who deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. My hope is that we never stop creating spaces for innovation and new ways of work, and that we take risks to try new things. And I hope that we bravely take these steps together in the work to center race equity, in the movement to end sexual violence, because we can't do this alone. Thank you.